Hi, it's Eve, and I was reflecting on my last video where I was describing like how frustrated I felt after the shows, which were the manifestation of the vision that this whole series is about, and how it kind of felt anticlimactic, or like, there was a part of me that expected, I guess, something to come from it because it's like, oh, I made this vision happen. And first of all, I didn't make it happen. That's kind of the whole point that I was trying to convey, that like that that manifestations from the soul, they happen without us like working at it. Like, that it's not linear, and I documented that process, and even so I still got back into the thinking of like, you know, that I did all this work and that I'm disappointed because like there are no fruits that I reaped, from that work. And that's bullshit because, first of all, it wasn't really me doing work. The part of me that feels frustrated is the part of me that's still in that illusion that, that life is linear, that, instead of it being like, like a film reel, old school kind, where it looks like it's one continuous thing, the movie, but it's actually just separate frames that have the illusion of continuity. That's what life is like. So it's like remembering that that I'm really creating for creation's sake. There's nothing that's meant to come out of it except the joy of creation itself. So one of the things that has kind of developed naturally from the performing of the shows was inspiring me to make storybooks out of those stories, which was always an idea that I had. Like, I thought eventually I would make books out of these stories, like fairy tales for children, but they're really for all ages. But in doing the performances, it kind of, I don't know, it pulled that more to the forefront. It made it more real. So now I feel like that's my next step. So it actually did provide a clear next step, but I guess not in the way that I was expecting, because what I was thinking the shows were for was like to attract the clients, or to have practice to do more shows. And again, those things might happen, but that's not what life is presenting for me now. That's not what I'm inspired to do right now. So although there's that whole like workshop about the soul of Kriya, but again, that it feels like a detour. So in that vein, when I thought about making storybooks, I assumed that I would I would look for an artist who's an illustrator, because the kind of art I was imagining for a book was not the kind of art that I usually make. And I really wanted it to be like classically beautiful and all this. But every time I kind of, let myself dream and visualize these books, it always came back that actually, like, I want to create the art. But I couldn't bring that to, I couldn't reconcile that with like the, what I know about myself. And so that's, I feel like, one of my next points of expansion. It's like, okay, well, if I truly believe that anything is possible, and what my soul is showing me is that I want to be the one creating the art that goes with these stories, and I want to make them into these magical books that help people remember the truth of who they are, then that's my next vision. And I don't need to know how it's going to manifest. Even though that one feels difficult because it's like, well, I have to have the talent. I mean, I can't just make that out of thin air, but it's like, I don't know. I don't know anything, So, and So when I got to that place where I was really just like, okay, I'm just going to trust that that's the next vision that's coming, I came across, okay, so there's a movie called A Monster Calls. It's based on a book. And I'm going to talk about it. So if you don't want to know anything about the movie and don't want it spoiled, don't listen anymore. So as soon as I saw previews for that movie months ago, I was like, I got to watch this because it talks about stories and how stories, the power of stories, and how they're wild creatures and you don't know what kind of havoc they can wreak once they're unleashed. I just love that idea. And from the previews, it seemed like, there's a boy who's going through all this trauma and how he's like just encouraged to express all of those feelings and just how rare that is to see in like a movie, especially for children. So I was really psyched to watch the movie, and then I somehow missed it in the theaters, and I was really disappointed. So I ended up realizing that it was actually based on a book, and I borrowed the book from my library. And when I read it, it felt like a gift from the universe because this monster that calls, he always comes calling at 12:07, and 12:07 is my birthday. And I see that a lot lately on the clock. And so it has like significance for me. And so that felt special. It's like literally the first line of the book was 12:07. And then what the monster tells the boy is, I have 3 stories for you. I'm going to tell you 3 stories. And then after you hear the 3 stories, the 4th one is going to be the one you tell. And it's going to be your truth. And that felt very significant to me because this is when I was performing my 3 stories, And so it just, felt like a gift. I cried a lot when I read it. And that was that, And the stories are pretty much all about like how there's no good and evil, right? Like all the stories we hear as children, all the fairy tales, it's like reinforces duality. And this monster was saying like, that's not real. That's real life is much more complex than that, and sometimes like what seems like horrible things happen to good people, and there seems like there's no sense in it, and it was like, to me, it was like this monster was the embodiment of nature, of the wild, of the god Pan, right, of the devil, like the things that we can't control, the things that we're afraid of, but that are actually fucking beautiful and magical and real. That's what real life is. It's all of this stuff together. So, the other day, because it kept coming into me, this whole thing about like reconnecting with nature as in actual nature spirits and the spirits of plants and trees. I kept thinking about that book and that movie. And so I thought, I really want to see this movie. So I rented it like online. And in the movie, so the movie is very close to the book, except in the movie they include that the boy is an artist. And when the monster tells him these 3 stories, he shows it visually to the boy through these like ink, very kind of abstract but beautiful like ink drawings of the scenes in the 3 stories. So I love ink, and again, I don't draw or paint yet the way that it showed in this movie, but even the fact that they were using ink and not like the traditional, more common type of animation, and the fact that it was somewhat abstracted but very elegant, and in the end, it ends up that those ink drawings were actually, so the mother is dying in the movie. The whole movie is about how the boy is dealing with her death, and in the end, he realizes that the ink scenes that the monster was showing him were actually drawings that his mother had made. So, of course, to the boy, right, that's like this trippy, crazy, like prophetic, going back in time, but being, eternal thing, right? And that's how I feel about my fucking stories. Like, and I'm still in it right now. Like I said, the 3rd story, which is all about like her this heroine like entering a different world, and realizing that she can communicate with flowers, and that's the only, and to enter that world you have to be naked, and the tree telling her that she can actually, there's a tree that grows inside her that is going to give birth to a new world, and all she has to do is like let herself feel the pleasure of her body. That's where I'm at right now. And so yeah, it was just one of those things where, like, again, I still don't know how I'm going to draw this stuff or how I'm going to make this art. But I know that it was no accident that I saw that movie at the time that I did. And yeah. And then it had all those elements that is like, that are so inspiring to me right now, which is like this connection with the wildness, the power of story, and the beauty of art that comes from that place. Yeah. So just to recap, so my point is that it's a reminder to myself to know that whatever I create, it can't be for something, right? Like, just like nature, like the flower grows and blooms and dies just because it's what it is. It's not trying to do anything. And so for me, like when I created this shows, when I first had like the vision, I was just excited, and it's what came in, and then I did it. But then along the way, somehow it kind of came in, like, I guess my ego kind of started to take over and was like, this is, once I do these shows, this is going to happen, And, what I'm being reminded of again is that nothing happened from the shows that I could have predicted. And I couldn't make them happen for a purpose, but through them, something did happen that is actually greater and beyond anything that I could have thought of before I did the shows. So, yeah, I mean, the thought of me making art and publishing storybooks feels almost impossible to me, just like creating and performing these shows did when I first stated that back in October of 2016. So, yeah, my linear mind that's like, okay, that felt impossible, but now that it's happened, now I'm gonna, see the whole plan. Like, there would be no point in like working on these shows or whatever if I weren't going to do more shows, or if I wasn't going to like make money through it or whatever. But it's like, I actually have no idea what the shows are for, and yet I do, because it's really just what propelled me to the next vision that my soul wants, which is to create these books. And I don't know what's going to come from that, and how it's even going to happen. So I don't know if I'm going to create another video series documenting that process, but maybe.